The last time I saw my father alive, he was hooked to more machines than I could count. Yet his eyes searched the door like he was waiting for someone. Someone who never arrived. That someone was me. My name is Emery Clark, and I'm the older daughter. At least, that's how it used to be until my younger sister Piper slowly, deliberately erased me from everything and everyone. Our story wasn't always like this. We used to play dress-up in Mom's old scarves, giggle over burnt pancakes, whisper secrets under blanket forts. But people change, or maybe they just show who they always were once there's something worth fighting for. For us, that something was Dad's legacy. The unraveling began slowly. After Mom passed, Dad's health started declining. Heart complications, long hospital, stays, oxygen tanks in the living room. I was there, flying back and forth from Seattle every other week, leaving behind a startup job I worked my bones for. Piper, though? She stayed. She lived 15 minutes away and quickly became the caretaker everyone praised. The dutiful daughter, the reliable one, the one who sacrificed. I didn't argue. I was grateful. I thought we were a team, until Dad changed his medical proxy without telling me. She's here more often, he told the lawyer. And Emery's always flying. I bit my tongue then. I told myself, it's just paperwork. Dad loves us both. But things escalated quickly. Piper began intercepting his calls. I found out he'd been moved to a different hospital after the fact. I would fly in and find the bed empty, replaced by a nurse with an apologetic face saying, "Oh, his daughter handled the transfer." "I'm his daughter," I snapped once. "Oh, I thought you were the niece," the nurse replied. The niece, eh? Week before his final admission, I drove to Dad's house, our house, and my key didn't work. The locks had been changed. Piper opened the door, expression cool, and told me he was too tired for visitors. "He gets confused," she said. "It's best if I keep things simple for him." Simple meant excluding me. Simple meant lying. Simple meant when he passed, it was Piper who stood at his side holding his hand. Not me. But here's the part. She'll never forget. Because in his last breath, gasping, delirious, barely lucid, he didn't whisper her name. He whispered mine. The funeral was exactly what Piper wanted. Sterile, efficient, cold. She chose the cheapest package, played a slideshow that erased my face, and handed out programs that read, "In loving memory, survived by daughter, Piper Clark." No mention of me. I stood at the back, fists clenched, heart shattering. A few old family, friends glanced toward me in confusion. Whispers following their gaze like smoke. She buried him with nothing that belonged to our mother. Nothing from our childhood. No closure, no fairness. Just silence. And power. Because while I was grieving, she was making moves. 3 days after the funeral, I found out Piper had filed for full control of Dad's estate. She cited her years of caregiving, her cohabitation, her exclusive rights as a primary caregiver. The lawyer was an old friend of hers, a man I once trusted, and that's when I saw it. She was never the caretaker. She was the strategist. She used Dad's illness as a ladder, and every sacrifice she made was a rung toward ownership. Of the house, of the savings, of the memory. She didn't want to honor him. She wanted to own him. That night, I sat in my car across the street from the house I once called home. The curtains were new, the porch light off. And in the window, my old room, There was someone else's shadow. My name might have been left off the obituary, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for Piper to move in, paint over our childhood walls, and list my father's antique furniture on Facebook Marketplace. I only knew because I created a fake profile to watch it all unfold. Silent, seething. She sold his navy recliner, the one with the ripped armrest he refused to replace. She posted it as lightly used, ignoring the blood pressure stains, the sag in the cushion from the nights he fell asleep to westerns while holding his chest. $75. That's what she valued it at. That chair had cradled his pain, his breath, his final months. But to Piper, it was just clutter to clear. I showed up unannounced one morning, dressed in gray jeans and a coat that still smelled like Dad's cigars. The scent anchored me, grounded me in my purpose. She opened the door with her trademark sigh, already playing the victim. "Emery, you can't just keep showing up here." "Where's the photo album?" I asked. Her face froze. "What photo album?" "You know which one. Mom's leather bound. The one with the Polaroids and the letters she wrote to Dad when they dated." "I don't know. Maybe Dad threw it out." She stepped back and crossed her arms. "Or maybe it's mine now. This is my house." I laughed, bitterly. "He left it to both of us." "No," she said, smirking. "He left me everything." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a copy of the will, dated 6 weeks before he died. All assets, property, and possessions were to go to Piper Clark. And at the bottom, where 2 daughters should have been listed, only one name. Later that night, I sat in my apartment with the will in one hand and a bottle of Cabernet in the other. My boyfriend Milo watched from the kitchen, unsure whether to speak or let me unravel. "You really think she manipulated him?" he asked. I didn't even hesitate. "I know she did." "She's smart," he admitted. "But you're smarter." It wasn't a compliment. It was a challenge. I requested Dad's medical records. Milo's cousin worked at the hospital and owed him a favor. Within 2 days, I had everything, from dosage logs to shift notes. That's when I saw it. February 11th, 8:44 p.m. Patient requested to call Emery Clark. Said repeatedly, "Need to speak to M." No call made. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. She kept him from me, deliberately. She ignored his voice when it called out for mine, but it wasn't the only note. There were 5 separate requests logged over 6 weeks where he asked for me. Desperate, confused, sometimes angry, always denied. The nurse initials matched: JP, Julia Proctor, Piper's best friend since high school, and the attending physician, Dr. Noel Ryden, Piper's ex. It was a web, a quiet one, but each strand tied her deeper into a betrayal that went beyond hurt feelings. This wasn't just emotional theft, it was premeditated erasure. I printed the records and placed them next to the will. Then I opened my laptop and created a private folder titled Operation Legacy. Inside it, I saved every document, every message, every log. I wasn't going to confront her with anger. I was going to bury her with truth. The next morning, I called the probate office. I asked one question. Was the will notarized in person? The clerk hesitated. Let me check. Yes, signed in front of a notary, March 3rd. I blinked. Are you sure? I asked. Positive. I hung up and stared out the window. Because On March 3rd, Dad was in the ICU, intubated. He hadn't spoken a word in 2 days. I stood outside Piper's house again. My old house. She was in the front yard, laughing with a realtor, gesturing at the walkway like she had planted every flower. I smiled. Let her decorate. Let her celebrate. Because while she thought the house was hers, I was about to set the entire foundation on fire. I didn't sleep the night I uncovered the will's date. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin in lazy circles, my father's voice echoing in my head, raspy, weakened, calling for me, again and again. He couldn't have signed anything on March 3rd. I was there 2 days later. I held his hand. He couldn't speak, could barely blink. The nurses used suction every hour just to help him breathe. There was no way. The will was a fraud. By morning, I had a plan. A real one. It started with someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. Miles Hendricks, our family's old estate attorney. Dad dropped him when Piper insisted on someone more accessible during his hospital months. Miles had been loyal to Dad for nearly 2 decades, through the house purchase, through Mom's cancer, even through the brief time Dad thought about selling the cabin in Big Bear. I found him still practicing out of a strip mall office on the east side of town, his name now slightly faded on the signage. He blinked when he saw me walk in. "Emery Clark?" "I need your help," I said. His brow furrowed. "Is this about your father's estate?" I thought. "You thought wrong." In a back room stacked with old case folders and water-stained ceiling tiles, I laid it all out. Medical records, the March 3rd date, the proxy change, the financial transfers. Miles read it all slowly, and with each page, his jaw set harder as she changed everything after your father lost full capacity, he said at last. She isolated him, blocked my calls, changed medical staff to her friends. I tapped the final page, the notarization record. He couldn't speak. There's no way he signed anything. "Do you want to pursue this legally?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to prove she knew what she was doing, that she planned it. I want a trail." Miles sat back. "Then you need leverage." He was right, and I knew exactly where to find it. Piper had always kept her secrets in plain sight. She hid behind smiles, behind Pinterest boards and Instagram stories of caregiver life and family strength. Her phone rarely left her hand, and her laptop? Always open on the kitchen island. She wasn't the type to delete. She was the type to forget that. Anything could be used against her. That's when I called Jamie, our cousin, tech nerd, and former cybersecurity consultant. "I know it's a huge ask," I said, "but I need to recover emails, records, any trace of what she did. Appointments, notary visits, deleted texts. I'll pay whatever." Jamie didn't hesitate. "She blocked me on Instagram for calling her out at the funeral," he said. "I'll do it for free." 4 days later, Jamie sent me a zipped folder. I stared at the file names in awe. Piper Willdraft.docs Dryden Meeting 227.mp3 Notary Request Final.pdf Julius Nurse Note Draft.txt, and then something that made me stop. Breathing. Emery called again. Ignore text. I opened it. Inside was a list of every time I tried to call in Dad's last weeks. Piper had written, "If she calls again, tell her he's sleeping. She'll eventually stop. Too busy playing city. Girl anyway." Below that, Julia's reply. "Done." You deserve peace, babe. She's not the real daughter anymore. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not the real daughter. All this time, I thought Piper wanted to be closer to Dad, to feel loved, to prove herself. But she didn't want love. She wanted to erase me. I printed everything, created binders, one for the lawyer, one for court, and one just for me, to look at when I needed to remember who I was fighting. Then I bought 2 things, a bouquet of lilies, Dad's favorite, a digital recorder, small enough to clip under a blouse collar, because I wasn't just coming for her inheritance. I was coming for the confession. The next morning, I stood at her door. She opened it, still in silk pajamas, hair in rollers. Oh. You again. I just want to talk, I said sweetly. She folded her arms. You want to snoop through the house, see what you didn't get. I tilted my head. Is that what you think? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back and let me in. The walls were painted pale blue now. Mom's floral wallpaper gone. Our family photo was missing from above the fireplace, replaced with an abstract canvas in cold, sterile grays. It wasn't our home anymore, but that was fine, because it wouldn't be hers much longer either. Piper, I said, once we sat in. The kitchen. I know you changed the will. She didn't flinch. I know Dad was in the ICU. I know about Julia. I know about Dr. Ryden. Still, her face was marble. I leaned in, voice steady. You forged a signature. You silenced his voice. You cut me out and expected no one to notice. Her eyes narrowed. Prove it. I smiled. I will. She chuckled then, bitter and dry. You've always had this complex, Em. Like everything belongs to you. The attention, the grief, Dad. But guess what? You left. You chose your career, your city, your big life. I stayed. You stayed to take care of him? I asked. No, she snapped. I stayed to win. There it was. Raw. Unfiltered. The truth. My recorder caught every word. I stood and adjusted my coat. You'll be hearing from my attorney. You think this is going to bring him back? She called after me. No, I said. But it'll make sure he's remembered right. As I walked down the porch steps, the recorder ticking softly beneath my coat, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter anymore. I felt like someone who'd been reborn in the fire her sister lit, and this time, I wasn't leaving quietly. Piper didn't call me after that confrontation. Not to plead. Not to deny. Not even to lash out. She knew the sound of a line she couldn't uncross. But I wasn't waiting for her. I was already building the case. Miles filed the motion to contest the will the next morning. Forgery and undue influence, he muttered, as he read aloud from the affidavit we submitted, backed by medical incapacity, time-stamped audio, email metadata, and a witness list. Jamie had even managed to track down the notary, a woman named Carly Torres, who'd notarized a dozen of Piper's documents that same month. Carly didn't remember the exact day, but when Jamie showed her the date, she blinked. March 3rd, she'd said. I remember because that was the day I had a fever. I stayed home. I didn't notarize anything that day. We had a name, a signature, and a ghost witness. The court date was set, 2 weeks out. 2 weeks until Piper would face me publicly, in front of a judge. 2 weeks until the lies she wrapped around our father's death would unravel in front of everyone she'd fooled. But something shifted before we got there. 3 days after the motion was filed, Piper's fiancé Declan showed up at my door. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. His button-down was wrinkled, his knuckles raw like he'd been punching, something harder than a wall. "I shouldn't be here," he said, "but I can't keep watching her do this." I stared at him, cautious. "Do what, exactly?" He took a breath. "Destroy your father's name. Lie about you. Burn down everything for a bank account and a house she doesn't even love." "Why? Now?" He hesitated. "Because she made me lie for her." Turns out Declan had been the one who drove Piper to the hospital the day she claimed Dad signed the will, but they never went inside. They never even parked. "He was already unconscious," Declan whispered. "She sat in the car and scribbled something on a clipboard. Then she texted Julia and said it was done." "Was he even alive when she signed it?" I asked. His eyes flicked away. "That's the thing. I don't know. He might have passed that night. And she still—" His voice broke. That's when I knew. I had my witness. Not just a document, or a folder, or a file, but someone who once loved her, who saw her for who she was and still flinched at the weight of what she'd done. Miles added Declan's name to the subpoena list the next day. I mailed Piper a formal notice, hand-delivered. She opened it on the porch. I watched from my car. Her face didn't flinch. She was steel. Even as the house behind her, the one she fought for, lied for, betrayed for, looked smaller now. A shell of what it once was. She was living in a mausoleum of stolen memories, and now she'd face every ghost she created. The night before the court hearing, I stood in front of my father's gravestone. I knelt, brushing dried leaves from the base, and placed the lilies gently at the edge. "Tomorrow's for you," I whispered. "They tried to rewrite your love, but I remember it all." I touched the marble. It was cold, but it didn't feel empty anymore, because I wasn't alone. Back home, I stared at the box in my closet. Dad's old camcorder, the one Piper said, was probably lost in the attic. But it wasn't. I'd taken it 2 years ago after Mom's funeral, not knowing why, not needing a reason. Inside were tapes, old, grainy, humming with static and laughter. I found the one I needed. Thanksgiving, 2004. Dad in the kitchen. Mom giggling as she stirred gravy. Piper sulking in the corner. Me dancing with him, barefoot on the tile. "You'll always be my favorite girl, Em," he said into the camera, laughing. "Don't tell your sister." I heard that. Piper whined off camera. He winked at me. "I'm not worried. She already thinks she's queen of the universe." We laughed. We were whole. I smiled through tears, uploaded the clip, and backed it up in 3 different drives. The past had a heartbeat, and tomorrow I'd make it echo loud enough for the judge to hear. The courthouse hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and stale paper. I sat on the wooden bench outside courtroom 2C, clutching a folder stuffed with truths. Each document, email printout, recorded quote. It was all laid out like a map of betrayal. Across the hallway, Piper leaned against the wall in a pristine navy pantsuit, flipping through her phone like this was just a routine appointment. Her face was calm, but her fingers trembled. Declan sat 2 chairs down from her, purposefully angled away. They hadn't spoken once since we arrived. Miles stood beside me, his old leather briefcase balanced on his knee. "You okay?" "I'm ready," I said. "I've never been more ready." The courtroom was mostly empty. Just a few scattered spectators and the quiet hum of clerks preparing files. Piper's lawyer, a smug man named Rothwell Crane, opened with a speech so oily it nearly dripped off the bench. "Ms. Clark," he purred, motioning to Piper. "Acted out of love, loyalty, and direct instruction. She was there when no one else was. The will she presents is not only valid, but reflects a dying father's clearest wishes." The judge nodded, but scribbled something. I hoped it was question March 3rd. Then Miles stood. His voice was quieter, but it sliced through the room with precision. "We contest the legitimacy of the will dated March 3rd on two fronts. One, that the testator, Mr. Raymond Clark, was medically incapacitated and could not have signed or understood the document. And two, that undue influence was exercised by Ms. Piper Clark, paired with fraudulent documentation and witness manipulation." Then he handed over the binder. "Exhibits A through K." The judge raised an eyebrow. "This is extensive." "Oh." Miles smiled dryly. "We're just getting started. The first bomb dropped with the medical log. Dad's condition, the nurse entries, the fact he was sedated and unresponsive the very week the will was signed. Then came Carly Torres, the notary. She testified via Zoom. "I never signed anything on March 3rd, she said clearly. "I was homesick. I've submitted my time-off form and medical records." Then she looked directly into the camera and added, "If my name is on that will, it's forged." Piper's jaw tightened, but she didn't look surprised. Then came the recording. We played only 35 seconds of it in court, her voice on tape. She'll eventually stop. Too busy playing city girl anyway. Done. You deserve peace, babe. She's not the real daughter anymore. And finally, I stayed to win. The silence in the courtroom afterward was suffocating. The judge glanced at Piper for the first time. Not as a grieving daughter, but as a manipulator. And that's when Miles nodded toward the witness list. "Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to call one final witness, Mr. Declan Rowan." Piper whipped her head toward Declan. Her lips parted. "Declan." But he didn't even glance her way. He took the stand and told the truth. The car ride, the fake clipboard, her refusal to go inside the hospital, her giddy laughter afterward as she said, "It's all mine now." The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on Piper. "Ms. Clark," he said slowly, "did you at any point obtain legal guardianship documentation?" "No," she said softly. "Medical power of attorney?" I had verbal permissions, but no written or court-appointed authority?" She floundered. "My father trusted me. He said I was the only one." "According to who?" She didn't answer. Outside the courtroom, I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk or throw a final jab. I just walked past her as the judge ordered a full investigation. Into the will, a temporary freeze on all assets, and a forensic handwriting analysis. But before I reached the doors, Piper said something behind me. "He always loved you more." I paused, then turned around. "No," I said. "He just never had to question who I was when the lights were off and no one was looking." That night, Milo and I sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping wine in the dark. Below us, the city glowed soft and amber. "It's not over," I said. "No," he agreed, "but she's cracking, and that was all I needed." Cracks let light in, and I was going to flood her world with it. By the time the handwriting expert filed his report, the cracks had grown into full-blown fractures. The analysis was damning. Dad's signature on the will? A traced overlay of his 2019 mortgage documents, so perfect it was almost laughable. Jamie proved it with a pixel analysis overlay, and even the court's appointed expert agreed. "It's not even forged," the analyst said in court. "It's copied." Rothwell, Piper's lawyer, looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. By then, he had stopped defending her. He was just trying to limit the fallout. The judge issued a ruling to invalidate the March 3rd will. That alone would have been enough to restore what was mine, my half of Dad's estate, my rightful share, and the truth of who I was in his eyes. But it was no longer just about property or even the money. It was about the image Piper painted. The lie she sold to our family, our neighbors, the world. Of a daughter abandoned by her sister, forced into sainthood. That image was beginning to crack in public. The community response came slowly at first. Quiet conversations, awkward side glances. Then the local newspaper ran a story. Family feud over Clark estate raises, questions over end-of-life fraud. The reporter called it a bitter courtroom. Battle. But what caught fire was the quote from Declan. She locked her sister out. She didn't want to share grief. She wanted to own it. Suddenly, Piper wasn't just my sister. She was headlines, and not the kind she wanted. I got a text from our Aunt Cecilia 2 days after the article went live. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it had gotten this bad." She attached a photo from Thanksgiving 2023, one I wasn't invited to. There was Piper at the head of the table, carving Dad's turkey like it was already hers. Dad sat 2 chairs down, pale, tired, barely upright. His eyes weren't on the food or the family. They were looking at something beyond the camera. Something that wasn't there. That photo broke me, because I knew what he was staring at. Me. The daughter who wasn't invited. The fallout kept building. Julia, the nurse and Piper's friend, was fired from her job. The hospital issued a statement about breach of care protocols and inappropriate familial interference. Dr. Ryden resigned a week later. His clinic replaced the glass signage out front. No trace of him remained. Meanwhile, I returned to Dad's house. No longer locked out. No longer standing across the street like a ghost. I used my key. The original one. The one from before the locks were changed. I walked through the halls slowly, breathing in the familiar scent of cedar, lemon oil, and memory. In the living room, I found the shoebox Dad used to keep beneath the couch. Inside were old postcards I'd sent him from Seattle, his favorite pen, a cufflink Mom bought him their first Christmas, and a folded sheet of paper I didn't recognize. It was a handwritten note. No date, no envelope, just 6 words in his shaky script. Give Emery the garden and peace. I pressed it to my chest. He never stopped thinking of me. Not through the noise. Not through the sickness. Not through her. I spent the next 2 days cleaning the house. Not to stay. Not yet. But to restore it, I dusted the photo frames she'd removed. I put Mom's tea set back on the shelf. I threw out the abstract art and rehung our family portrait. Then I walked out to the garden. It had overgrown, wild and tangled, but beneath it all, the rose bushes still bloomed in clusters. His garden. My peace. Later that week, I got a letter from Piper's new lawyer. A last attempt. A proposed settlement that asked for 20% of the estate in exchange for dropping all appeals. I didn't even open the PDF. I called Miles and said 6 words. Send her a counter. She gets nothing. The legal judgment was finalized 1 week later. Full estate split per the previous will. The real one. The one Dad and Miles drafted in 2020. Half for me, half in trust for community projects Dad had always talked about funding. Piper's name wasn't on a single line. She called me that night. The first time in 2 months. I stared at the screen, unsure if I wanted to pick up. But I did. "Em," she said softly, her voice frayed and fragile. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "There's nothing left between us to fix." A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, "Did he really say your name?" My throat clenched. I didn't answer for a while, and then I said the truest thing I'd ever known. He never stopped. The settlement wasn't the end. It was the start of silence. The kind that stretches across years and holidays. The kind that reshapes families. Piper disappeared from local circles. Sold her townhouse. Changed her number. Deleted her social. Media after the story made its way to a regional human interest blog titled, "When the Grieving Lie, the Cost of Cutting Bloodlines." I didn't share it. I didn't need to. By then, truth had grown its own legs. A month after the judgment, I stood with Milo in the backyard of Dad's house, my house now, and watched as landscapers trimmed the hedges and restored the beds around the garden. They paused when they reached the tangled roses. "Want us to cut this back?" one asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "Let it grow wild. That's how he liked it." I found the letters weeks later. They were in a plastic file box in the attic, right next to a stack of my childhood school papers Dad had labeled in black marker, Ems Wins Vol. 1. Inside the folder were 7 letters, each written in shaky cursive on yellowed legal paper, each addressed to Emery. The last one had a date, March 2nd, the day before the forged will. I opened it, hands trembling. I'm tired. I can feel it coming. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I keep hoping I'll get one more day with you. One more cup of tea. One more time watching you laugh at those awful home renovation shows. But if not, if I'm gone before we get that, just know this. You were my strength. Even from far away. Even in silence. I never doubted you loved me. I never doubted who you were. Don't let Piper's bitterness become your burden. She's been chasing something broken since your mother died. But you, Emery, you're whole. And you'll always be my greatest joy. Dad, I cried for a long time. Not the angry tears of betrayal or the tight, vengeful sobs I'd swallowed over the past year. These were the soft, aching kind. The kind that come when the storm finally passes, and you realize what you fought for wasn't justice or revenge. It was remembrance. I framed the letter and placed it on the hallway wall next to a photo of us fishing when I was 8. Dad smiling, his hat crooked. Me grinning up at him, soaked and barefoot. We didn't catch a single fish that day, but we caught each other. The community fund he left behind launched quietly under his name, the Raymond Clark Youth Garden Project. Every spring we host workshops for kids without backyards. We teach them how to plant something, how to take care of it, how to wait and water, and not give up when it doesn't bloom right away. And every time a little girl puts a seed in the soil with her bare fingers, I think of Dad's letter. You're whole. But sometimes, Piper still haunts the edges. She sent a single birthday card this year. No return address. No apology. Just 5 words. I didn't know he wrote you. I didn't respond. Because she did know. Maybe not in ink, but in every unspoken truth she tried to bury. And now, every flower that blooms in Dad's old yard, every child who walks through the garden gates, every inch of soil that lives on in his name, proves that some roots run too deep to be stolen. The house no longer felt like a memory. It felt like mine. Not because the title deed bore my name now, or because the courts had finally corrected a cruel betrayal, but because I had chosen what to preserve and what to let go. Dad's flannel jacket still hung by the back door. His records were cleaned and alphabetized, waiting in a wooden crate beside the player. Every Sunday morning, I'd let the music fill the kitchen while the kettle whistled, just like he used to. But everything else? Gone. No more locked drawers. No more suspicious eyes through window panes. No more Piper's poisoned footprint on the walls. Just light. The garden bloomed that spring in ways I hadn't expected. The soil, once dry and choked by weeds, had softened. Bees hovered again. Vines climbed along the pergola where Dad once hung fairy lights. The community began showing up on Saturdays. Volunteers, parents, kids with scraped knees and shy smiles. They came not for the inheritance or the legacy, but for the peace it brought them. For the healing it offered in quiet handfuls of earth. One morning, while laying out gloves for a new group of students, I heard footsteps behind me. Soft. Familiar. Turned slowly. Piper stood by the gate. She looked thinner. Hair longer. A tiredness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. In her hand, a small clay pot. A single sprout poked through the dirt. We stood there, watching each other through years of silence. She finally stepped forward and placed the pot gently on the workbench beside me. I didn't come for anything, she said quietly. Just wanted to leave something that grows. I stared at it. A baby jasmine plant. Fragile. Rooted. Why now? I asked. She looked past me, toward the kids laughing in the corner by the compost. I had a dream last week, she said, voice barely audible. He was in the garden. You were there. I wasn't. Silence. And when I tried to come in, she added, he closed the gate. My throat tightened. I said nothing. She nodded once, took a step back, and whispered, I know I won't ever be let in again, but I hope something good comes from me, even if I'm not part of it. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow, but I didn't throw the plant out either. I moved it to the windowsill of Dad's old study, the same one where he used to write notes, letters, and quietly keep track of birthdays and bloom times. The jasmine stayed. It didn't erase the past, but it became part of it, a small truth in a garden of larger ones. That summer, the project expanded. The local school offered a partnership grant. Milo and I announced our engagement beneath the apple tree in the garden, the same tree I once climbed as a girl pretending to fly. He called me the girl who brought her family back from ashes. But that's not what I did. I didn't bring my family back. I buried what had to die. And then I grew something better. On the anniversary of Dad's passing, I sat on the bench at the edge of the yard, the wind rustling through lavender stems, the scent of earth and lemon balm wrapping around me. I pulled a worn letter from my pocket. His handwriting still as uneven and steady as I remembered. You'll always be my greatest joy. And for the first time in years, I smiled without ache. Because I knew he was right.